What is going on, guys and gals? Brooklyn-bound the Raid Scientist here with another Destiny 2 raid video. Today, we're going to cover the newest raid in Destiny 2, the Witch Queen, Vow of the Disciple. We're going to take an in-depth guide to each encounter and show you how to access all the secret chests and how to get the most out of this raid. If you're new here and you find this video helpful, please help me out by commenting on the video and giving it a thumbs up. All right, let's jump into it then. If you're new to this raid completely, then you're really going to want to do one thing before you get started, and that is to memorize the symbol callouts. This raid relies very, very heavily on a set of 26 different symbols that are present in every encounter and are essential to success in finishing. You and your team are going to need to know all the callouts and be on the same page on what you're calling things. Shown on the screen here is all of the symbols and callouts. Feel free to pause the video or screen capture it if you want to memorize them. And note that there are official Bungie names for each symbol as you see, but feel free to call them whatever you want. Just be sure that you and your team agree. Now, once you're finally ready, you'll launch the raid from the throne world and immediately will start in a familiar area in the miasma. Savathun's projection will be in front of you. You'll need to take her down to enter. Once the doors open, hop on your Sparrow and head further into the bog to begin the first encounter. A few notes about this encounter first is that if you have already done the preservation mission, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Secondly, this isn't a darkness zone, so you can self-revive. And 3, there is a secret chest in this area that spawns after you shoot 3 specific crystals, which I'll show you in a minute. So, once you've sparrowed far enough, you'll come across this black floating platform with an interesting darkness spinning thing on top of it. Note, you'll need to escort this platform all the way to the end, dispatching groups of enemies along the way. Every time it stops, waves of enemies will spawn with yellow bar abominations that need to be taken out. During this time, you need to stay near the platform to prevent a debuff called Pervading Darkness from stacking too high. If you get to 10 stacks of Pervading Darkness, you'll die. Once you've dispatched all the yellow bar enemies, 9 orange glowing crystals will spawn randomly within a short distance of the platform. You'll need to collect all 9 of them and return to the platform to continue. Note that you can only hold 3 at a time, so the quickest way is to just have multiple people go grab them and come back. Once you've collected and returned all 9, the platform will continue on to the next location. And you're going to keep repeating this until it stops 5 or 6 times until you finally reach the large pyramid ship at the end to enter. Now, here's how you activate the secret chest. There are 3 spinning crystals that need to be shot throughout the encounter. The first one is hidden off to the left after the first stop as shown on screen. Then, the second is off to the left up behind these pillars after the second stop as shown on screen. And finally, the third and last one is under this bridge, which is right after the third stop as shown. If you shoot all 3 in the same instance, the door to the chest will spawn, which is after the 4th stop, and you can run into this room and grab it. Note that you can only get items you've already unlocked in the raid here, and mods. So if this is your first time in the raid, you'll likely only get a mod. Now, once you enter the pyramid ship, enter the large room and look for this drop down and proceed forward to the first encounter. You'll pass a room with all different symbols, which is used to get to the lore entries, and finally enter this massive room with a large bone in the middle. This is the first looted encounter, Acquisition. The goal here is to repeat 3 cycles of symbol collections in different rooms, and then enter those symbols onto the correct obelisk. To prepare, you'll need to split your team into 3 groups of 2. In addition, since there's no boss here, you'll want to have ad-clearing weapons and supers as well. Having a good heavy weapon to kill taken knights quickly is also helpful, like a tracking rocket launcher, sleeper cement, and so on. There will also be unstoppable champions, so having an unstoppable weapon is very helpful. Now, before you start, you're going to want to learn the room makeup here. There are 9 doors around the room with symbols above them, and there are 3 obelisks, one near the entrance, one on the left, and one on the right. Note the obelisks are 3-sided and have 9 total slots on them for symbols. In front of each obelisk is what I will call the tower that is 1-sided and only has 3 empty spaces for symbols. These will populate as the encounter progresses. Finally, in the very center of the room is a darkness crystal, which will be used to open and close the doors to the different rooms around the map. Shooting this crystal also starts the encounter. This encounter is probably the most mechanic heavy and requires lots of callouts and remembering of symbols. Once you've split your team up into 3 pairs, each pair will start next to one of the 3 obelisks. You'll want to designate one of the players to be the runner and one of the players to be the defender. Let's go over the defender's job first. The defender's job is to clear all of the ads around the obelisk and call the symbols that pop up on the tower next to the obelisk as they appear. Note, if you're the defender, watch out for the orange bar aberrants that are holding shields that will spawn and actually shoot and damage your obelisk. If you allow them to do too much damage to it, it will cause a wipe. The other enemies will not attack the obelisk, but still can overwhelm you, so make sure you keep clearing them. Now, as I said, as the defender, your job is to also call out the symbols that is on your tower next to your obelisk when they show up. You will get a total of 3 symbols that always start at the top and work their way down to the bottom. The top symbol will always be either the pyramid or the traveler symbol, nothing else. This symbol tells you which side of the arena a taken knight has spawned, the pyramid being the left side of the arena and the traveler being the right side. If you look at the big structure in the middle of the room, you will see that the pyramid is on the left side and the traveler is on the right side, which reminds you which is which. This taken knight is a very crucial enemy to kill for a few reasons. First, killing it will allow the encounter to progress, because once it's dead, the second symbol on the tower will now appear. It's also very important to kill, because if it's left up too long, your obelisk timer will fill up a little quicker, causing you to wipe. The obelisk timer is designated on the obelisk by the gold glow that slowly fills up to the top. This taken knight will always spawn in sneaky locations on the outskirts of the arena. Shown in this map here are all his locations. Be mindful when you hear one is spawned and make sure you go look for it, and make sure you kill it quickly as well with heavy. Now, once the knight has been killed, it will cause a second symbol to appear on the tower next to the obelisk. This symbol is the room that has a designated glyph keeper for the runner to go kill. Call out the room symbol name, and your runner will go enter that room. Remember, if the door to their room is closed, they may call you as the defender to shoot the crystal in the middle of the room to open it up for them. Then, finally, once they've entered the room, the third symbol will show up, and it will either be the light symbol or the darkness symbol. And this needs to be called out as well, because it will tell them which glyph keeper in the room they need to kill. Note that when they kill their glyph keeper, an unstoppable champion will spawn, so be ready for it. So, in quick summary as the defender, you're going to clear ads and focus on the orange shielded aberrants who attack the obelisk, and you're going to call out the symbols when they appear on your tower, and also listen for other teams to call out knights and help search and kill the taken knights. Now for the runner's job. The runner's job is to run to the door, which is being called out by the defender. Remember that the second symbol that shows up on the tower next to the obelisk dictates which of the 9 rooms you need to go into. When they call it out, find the room and go inside. If you need the door opened, shout it out so someone can shoot the crystal to open it. When you go inside, pause for a second as a wave of screebs will spawn. Take them out quickly and then listen for your defender to call out which glyph keeper you need to kill. There will be 2 chieftains called glyph keepers, and they will be split on opposite sides of the room. Each side of the room will have a large symbol of darkness and light, dictating which is which. So if your defender calls out darkness from their tower, that means you have to kill the glyph keeper on the side of the room with the darkness symbol. And if they call light, you'll need to kill the glyph keeper on the side of the room with the light symbol. When that Glyph Keeper dies, right in its place will spawn yet another symbol. This symbol needs to be remembered or written down, as it is one of the 3 symbols you'll need to input into the obelisk when it's finally time. Once you have it, you can leave the room and head back to help your defender clear ads and look for knights. Now, while this is all going on, the other 2 pairs of people at the other 2 obelisks will essentially be doing the same thing at the same time. The knight spawns are somewhat staggered, but basically you will have multiple people calling out different things at the same time, so be clear who you're talking to and what you need them to do. It can get confusing if you're calling out multiple doors and Glyph Keepers at the same time. Ultimately, you'll have 3 knights to go find and kill, 3 rooms to enter, 3 of the correct Glyph Keeper to kill in those rooms, which will provide 3 different symbols as the combination to the obelisk. Once you have done all of this, the obelisk will resonate and await the input of those 3 symbols. Now, only one of the 3 obelisks in the arena will have all 3 symbols that were called out. Once you figure out which obelisk it is, designate people to shoot all 3 symbols at the same time. If done correctly, it will say the obelisk accepts your input. If done incorrectly, it'll say it rejects it. If you take too long, the obelisk will rearrange, and if you let it rearrange too many times or input it incorrectly too many times, you will wipe. You have to shoot all 3 symbols at the same time, not in any specific order. Once you've correctly input the code and it's been accepted, the entire encounter will reset, and you'll need to repeat everything again 2 more full times. You will need to enter the correct code on all 3 obelisks to finish the encounter. As I've already said, this encounter is by far the most mechanic heavy, and it really stresses the need to learn these symbol callouts. While the overall goal is relatively simple, the number of moving pieces, symbols, and different things going on can kind of make it confusing. Learn the callouts, learn the knight spawns, and you'll be collecting your loot in no time. Once you've finished, push forward and run through a few rooms before you finally enter this room with the next encounter. Head up the stairs to the top, passing this massive Scorn boss. This encounter is the first boss fight, the Caretaker. To prepare, you'll want 2 people to designate to be on the boss stun team, 2 people to be on ad clearing duties, which can also assist with stun if needed, and finally 2 people on symbol collections. I'll cover what they do in a second. For supers and weapons, you'll want to maximize DPS here. Heavies like linear fusions are great, or snipers like Izanagi because the boss can get kind of close to you at times and rockets can be dangerous. However, if everyone is careful, you can use rockets like Gallowhorn and things if you want. I also recommend a good secondary weapon that can do some damage too, like a fusion rifle with Vorpal or firing line, or a Vorpal sniper rifle. Ammo drops can be kind of infrequent in this fight, and you will likely run out of heavy at times, and you'll need other ways to maximize damage. For supers, hunters likely want to be on Tether Mobius Quiver with Orpheus Rig, or Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk. Warlocks have 1 person on Well of Radiance maybe, and the rest on Nova Bomb. And Titans have 1 on Bubble for a DPS buff, as well as the rest on Thunder Crash. Finally, you want to have 1 person on a Divinity for the debuff and increase crit spot too. If you don't have a Divinity, then a Tractor Cannon and Tethers can also work. This fight takes place on 4 different floors, and as you progress, you will go up each level using staircases that appear after damage gates have been achieved. You are essentially trying to kill the Caretaker. To do this, you'll need to prevent him from reaching the obelisk on each floor, which will wipe the raid. By inputting all of the correct symbols on the obelisk, you will be able to damage him. So, let's cover what each team does. First, the stun team. The stun team's job is to keep the Caretaker from getting to the obelisk on each floor. To do this, have 2 people flank him on each side. 1 person will approach him and aggro him, will cause his face to glow gold. When he does this, shoot his face and it will cause his backpack to glow gold as well. Have the other person behind him shoot his back when this happens, and doing so will stun him for about 5 to 10 seconds. You literally just need to keep repeating this as much as possible to slow him down long enough so he doesn't reach the obelisk. Make note of the ads around the room as well, and the little darkness things that pop out of them and fly in the air. You want to shoot these down as much as possible because they can come back down and attack you, causing damage, and giving you the pervading darkness, which is that debuff from the first encounter which kills you at 10 stacks. The ad clearing team will be focusing on ads around the room, which include Taken Scions, Taken Vandal Snipers, and Orange Bar Shielded Aberrants, which, just like the first encounter, will shoot the obelisk and can cause you to wipe. So if you see them, take them out quickly. The ad clearing team can always help stun as well and keep the flying darkness bug-looking things to a minimum that come out of the Caretaker. Finally, there will be 2 people on the symbol collection team. On each floor, there will be a single obelisk with 9 symbols. Behind it, it will be a large room that can be entered by shooting the same looking darkness crystals. The first floor only has 1 door, but later floors have multiple doors. Inside this room are 9 symbols to be collected. You can only carry a maximum of 3 at a time. So, one person will go in and grab 3 symbols, and remember which ones they grabbed. Be careful of the Taken Thrall and wizards inside, as well as pits you can fall in. Finally, also note that you have to be fast, as when you are inside, you will also get the pervading darkness, which will start to stack quickly, and if you get to 10 stacks, you'll die. You do not have to get 3 symbols if you don't want, but just note that the most you can grab is 3. Once you've gotten your symbols, run back out of the room and get ready to shoot the same symbols on the obelisk. It'll say, the obelisk awaits your name's offering. Together with the other symbol person, shoot all 3, or however many grabbed, at the same time. If done correctly, it'll accept the input. If not, it'll reject it and you'll have to go back in and get more symbols, which means each time you collect symbols, you only have 1 chance to input it correctly. So don't rush and shoot the wrong ones. After you input your symbols, send the other person in the room to collect their symbols and keep repeating. Pay attention when your partner is ready to come out, because they'll need you to open the door for them. Together, you'll need to collect all 9 symbols and clear all 9 of them off the obelisk to unlock damage phase. If you do this before the Caretaker gets to the obelisk, you'll get a tooltip that the ritual is complete, and from this you'll have about 15 seconds to get ready for damage phase. There are 3 circular plates on each floor that will light up orange when active for damage. The first one to activate will always be on the side the Caretaker is coming from. So if he's coming up from the right ramp, then the right side plate will be first. You'll know it's time for damage when you see Resonant Breakthrough buff on your superbar. Everyone congregate on the first plate and start unloading heavy and supers into him. The plates have a few rules that you should keep in mind. First, there is a height barrier, so you can't jump too high, otherwise you can't damage him. You also can't step off the plate either because you'll be unable to damage him too. For Thunder Crash, you can hit him if he's close enough because there's about a 1-second delay from when you step off the plate before you can't damage him. But up on later floors when the boss is further away, you will not be able to use it. Keep damaging him until he goes immune and the next plate lights up. Together, move to it and keep damaging. You'll notice on his health bar that he has a damage gate, meaning once you've done enough damage to him, he'll go immune even if you have more plates left. Once you've damaged him to this spot on his health bar, you'll have about 4 seconds to keep damaging him past this spot before he finally goes immune. To maximize damage, it's best to actually do weapon damage to him first to get him to his health threshold, and then right before you cross it, use your supers to push him past it as far as possible. Either way, once he goes immune, he'll teleport up a floor, the staircases will drop down and allow you to run up to the next level. Quickly grab some ammo and head upstairs. You'll repeat the exact same mechanics again on the next floors. One team keeps him stunned, one team clears ads, and one team does symbol collection and inputs them into the obelisk. Note that as you progress to higher floors, you can fall down. If this happens, you can run back up, but it will take some time. So you may need to call out to your team to help out with whatever job you had for a brief moment. There are 3 floors total, with a 4th and final floor for a final stand. Once you've depleted his health down to his last 10% on the 3 main floors, he'll go immune for this final stand. A staircase will come down on the 3rd floor, and you'll have 3 final plates on the top to finish him off. If you don't finish him off on this top floor, you'll wipe. Use supers for damage, heavy, and whatever you have left to finish him off. A few final notes about this encounter. The obelisk symbols and inputs can be a little finicky. Whoever the person was to actually go into the room and collect the symbols doesn't have to shoot all 3 symbols by themselves, but they do have to shoot at least one. Meaning one person can't collect the symbols and then the other person shoots them. The obelisk will say on screen whose offering it's waiting for, designated by the player that must shoot at least one of the symbols. Remember, you can go in and grab 1 symbol at a time or 2 at a time if you want. This does make it a little slower, but it can be a little bit easier to input it on the obelisk. If you have a good stun team, you should have plenty of time to make multiple trips into the room. Once the Caretaker falls, collect your loot and get ready for the major jumping section of this raid. I'd highly recommend equipping a sword here, going to Top Tree Dawnblade for Warlocks for the Icarus Dash, equip Stompies on the Hunter, and Lion Rampant for the Titan. This isn't a hard jumping puzzle, but it is by far the longest of any Destiny raid, and having these things makes it just a little easier, especially with some blind around the corner jumps. The first section is pretty simple. Head to the right as shown, and you'll keep jumping up the available platforms until you reach the first room with a bunch of ads. Clear them out, and note the darkness crystal on the right side of the room on top of this box. You'll want to leave 1 or 2 people behind in this area and send the others forward to the next section of jumping. This is because the crystal is needed to move the platforms in and out for people that pushed forward to progress. So, the people that push forward will reach a point where they have nowhere to jump, and they will call out for the people behind to shoot the crystal. It will cause the platforms to shift, allowing them to progress a little further. You'll need to do this a few times, continuing on until you finally reach a room with more enemies, and you'll see a tooltip that the path has stabilized at this point. The people that stayed behind to shoot the crystal can now push forward because all of the platforms in that section will now be available so they can catch up to the rest of the team. Note, the enemies in this area will keep spawning, which is why it's not a bad idea to leave 2 people behind in case the one person gets overwhelmed. You can respawn here, but it still helps to have a second person shooting. Now, in this section there are 2 directions you can go, but ultimately they take you to the same place. If you continue to the right and around this blind jump around the corner, you'll eventually make it up to a section where you can jump across some horizontal pillars and then up into a hidden room with a secret chest. Once collected, you can drop down into the next checkpoint room, which will cause the path to stabilize again, once again allowing the players that stayed behind to progress. Finally, the enemies here will keep respawning continuously, and there will be a final section where a few people will need to stay back and the others push forward. This time, shooting the crystal will spawn some horizontal pillars that come out of the walls which move, allowing you to jump ahead. Note, you can actually shoot the crystal again as well and cause them to go back the other direction, and that will give you a little bit more time to cross the opening. Once one person has made it across, the path will stabilize, and the remaining players can use the pillars that have now locked in place to jump across. If you're struggling here, a couple quick tips is that you could use the Top Tree Dawnblade Super to just Icarus Dash all the way across, or you can jump out with a sword on a Titan and then Thunder Crash across. But remember that once the path is stabilized, it's a lot easier to get across. Once you get up to the door, all 6 players need be at the door for it to open, allowing you to finally reach the 3rd major encounter of this raid, Exhibition. This encounter is probably the hardest to learn of them all, because it's fast-paced, lots of lots of mechanics, and multiple rooms that you kind of have to learn as you go, because you can't go explore these rooms freely before you start the encounter. If your team is mostly new to this encounter, expect some growing pains as you learn where everything is in each room and how it all works. All classes want to have on ad-clearing weapons here and ad-clearing supers. There are no bosses to do DPS to. I love to run Wither Horde and a sword here, but whatever you like to use to clear waves of ads quickly is probably best. Also note you do want to have a way to stun overloads, because there are overload hobgoblins in each room in this encounter. Alright, I'm going to explain the basic mechanics of the entire encounter, and then do a room by room breakdown. The goal of this encounter is to make it through 4 different rooms by killing Glyph Keepers to get symbols, and use those symbols to open locked doors along the way. As you progress through each room, you'll have specific relics to use that each have a different job. This encounter is also timed, meaning you have a limited amount of time to move from room to room before you wipe. Successfully clearing each room and placing the relics into the checkpoints will give you more time, as well as killing a specific shielded Taken Knight along the way, which we'll get to in a second. The timer is really what adds the stress and chaos to this encounter. So, how does it work? First, I'll cover the 3 relics and what they do. If you pick up any of the relics at any point, know that you cannot drop them, or you'll be locked out from picking them back up for 30 seconds. If you die holding one, you can pick it back up, however, but 2 of the 3 relics will have to go back to the last checkpoint room where they were stored to go get them. So essentially, if you pick up one of the relics, you will be using it for the entirety of that room. After each room is a checkpoint room where you'll deposit the relics, extending your timer, but it also forces someone else to pick it up. So everyone has to participate. The first relic is what I call the Orange Seed. This seed, when held, shoots an orange laser beam which can be used to kill enemies. The person holding the seed is responsible for killing a special shielded Taken Knight that spawns in each room. This Taken Knight spawns after a pair of Glyph Keepers is killed, and can only be killed by the person with the seed. Once killed, it will add about 45 seconds to a minute of time to your timer. Aside from the first room where you start, the remaining 3 major rooms will have 2 pairs of Glyph Keepers each, meaning there will be 2 knights that will spawn, and your timer can be extended twice. Also note the orange seed, when deposited in each checkpoint room, is the one relic that resets the timer and opens the next door. Other than killing the knights, use the seed indefinitely to just keep killing ads, because you have infinite ammo. The second relic is the Vault of Glass Shield, if you're familiar with that raid. The person holding this relic's main job is to routinely cleanse all 6 players of their Pervading Darkness debuff. This debuff is present at all times when you're in the rooms. It will stack up to 10, and when you get to 10, you will die. If you hold the cleanse ability while you're holding this relic, you can reset any player's stack to 0 if they walk through the white aura it produces. This is essential to keeping everyone alive. You can hold the cleanse indefinitely if needed, and make sure you focus on staying near players to cleanse them every 15 or 20 seconds or so. This relic can also be swung to melee enemies, and even has a super attack as well that you can use to kill ads. But the main job is to keep everyone cleansed from Pervading Darkness. The third and final relic only shows up in the last 2 rooms, and it is the Taken Blight Remover. In the final 2 rooms, there will be Taken Balls which shield enemies and make them immune. Only the person holding the Taken Blight Holder relic can destroy those and make it so the enemies can be killed. You walk up to the Taken Blight and use the Grenade ability, which is an attack, and it will kill the Blight and destroy that protection. This relic also has a shooting attack which has infinite ammo, so use this to kill enemies as well. Since you have to rotate who holds the relics in each room, it's best to designate 2 people for each one. One person does the relic in the one room, then deposits it, then their partner picks it up for the next room, and repeat. Now, we've covered the 3 relics and the main concept of what they do, so how do you progress through each room? This is where the Glyph Keepers and the symbols come back into play. At the end of each room is a locked door with 6 symbols on it. 2 of the symbols are the correct ones and 4 are the incorrect ones. You need to shoot the 2 correct symbols to open it. Note that the first room you start in only has 1 correct symbol, because the purpose of this small room to start in is just really to teach you how it all works. The 3 main rooms after this have 2 symbols required to open each locked door. When the encounter starts, 2 glyph keepers will spawn on opposite sides of the room. One will be a taken glyph keeper, and one will be a scorn glyph keeper. When they die, 3 symbols will appear above their heads where they died. Now, here's the tricky part. Only players holding a relic, any of the 3 I mentioned, can read the symbols that spawn from the taken glyph keeper. And only players without a relic can read the symbols that spawn from the scorn glyph keeper. The players who can read each set should call them out. Between the 2 glyph keepers, one of the symbols will be the same, and this is the symbol that is required to be input into the locked door. For example, if the left taken glyph keeper shows Hive, Stop, Worship, and then the right scorn one shows Guardian, Scorn, Hive, then Hive is the symbol that was dropped by both glyph keepers, and thus this is the symbol that needs to be shot on the door to open it. Now, as I said, the first room will only have 1 pair of glyph keepers, and only 1 symbol to shoot at. However, subsequent rooms will have 2 sets of glyph keepers each, meaning you'll need to remember callouts from both sets. Glyph keepers always spawn in pairs, and each pair that spawns will have 1 symbol that is the same. As you progress through each room, the glyph keepers won't spawn until you've killed enough adds, so you have to clear everything out as fast as you can. Once the glyph keepers are dead, do the callouts, and then remember that the person holding the orange seed needs to look for the taken knight to kill him and extend the timer. Then, repeat this process, pushing a little further, clearing adds, and killing the next set of glyph keepers, doing the callouts to find the second symbol, and then finally shooting the 2 symbols required to open the locked door. Note, as I said, after the second set of glyph keepers die, a second taken knight spawns again that can be killed by the orange seed holder. This gives you just a little bit more time. Once the locked door is opened, you'll run inside. Watch for screebs that can spawn and deposit the relics into the stones. This is where you'll reset your timer and swap who is holding the relics, which opens the door and moves you into the next room. Keep repeating this process room to room until you've cleared 4 total rooms and dropped the relics into the final stones. Now I'm going to try to do a rough breakdown of each room. If you want to just go ahead and skip to the final encounter guide of this raid, click on the timestamp here. Alright, in room 1 where you start, there is simply just the orange seed and then 2 glyph keepers. Kill them both, and remember that only the relic holder, which in this case is the person with the seed, can read the taken glyph keeper symbols. Find the common symbol between them, shoot it into the door code, and then the door opens. Drop the seed and have a new person pick it up, and have the other person pick up the Vault of Glass relic. Now, in the next room, split up 3 left and 3 right, clearing adds to get the first 2 glyph keepers to spawn. The taken knight will always spawn up by the locked door in the back of the room. Be careful pushing up too fast to get to him so you don't get decimated by adds. The second set of glyph keepers are a little further apart, with the right one being down under the bridge area and the left one being up by the cliff. This room really isn't too big, so everyone can essentially split up briefly to kill things and then meet back up wherever the Vault of Glass relic holder is to get cleansed easily. Input the 2 symbols to open the door and head into the next swap room. Watch out for screebs spawning here. The next room is easily the largest and probably the hardest. It introduces the Taken relic and forces the teams to split up. Note that the Taken Knight always will spawn on the pillar in the dead center of this big room. When you enter, the Vault of Glass relic holder and 1 ad clearer should always go left. Then, this is where some RNG will come into play. Essentially, the orange seed holder and the Taken Blight holder will need to go opposite directions. But which direction they go is dictated by the Taken Blights, which can actually change randomly each time you do this room. If when you enter the room, the first Taken Blight is up close, then the Taken Blight holder will need to go left with the Vault of Glass relic holder, and the orange seed holder will need to go right. However, if the first Taken Blight that spawns is to the left a little bit by the stairs, then the Taken Blight holder should go right for the beginning, and the orange seed holder should go left with the Vault of Glass holder. Now these 2 teams will essentially push forward with 3 and 3, respectively, killing adds and spawning the Glyph Keeper to do callouts. Then, Very important here that the Vault of Glass relic holder will need to quickly cleanse the people on the left side and then traverse the chasm to the other side to cleanse the players that are on the right. Once they've done this, they can go back across to the left side and help their team push forward up the ramps and clear the remaining adds. The right team stays right, goes up the stairs, and cleans their adds as well. At this point, the Taken Blight holder will also need to come across to clear any blights out on the side they didn't start out on, so they can prevent you from clearing the adds. In the final room, I recommend having the Orange Seed holder and the Vault of Glass relic holder stay in the middle arena kind of. This makes the Vault of Glass holder accessible by the remaining players to get cleansed, and the Orange Seed holder can kill adds from the middle and can also see the Taken Knight, which will spawn up on the large rectangular platform in the middle of the room. The Taken Blight holder and the other 3 players should go in the direction of the first Blight, clearing the respective alcove on that side and the Glyph Keeper. Then, everyone together can traverse across the middle of the room, grabbing a cleanse from the Vault of Glass holder, who should be in the middle, and then go to the other side and kill the other Glyph Keeper. Once you have the first set of callouts, push forward and watch for Hobgoblin Snipers, clearing the remaining adds and Glyph Keepers. This room is narrow enough that everyone can kind of stay together for the most part, with the Vault of Glass holder trying to remain accessible to everyone. Once you've opened the final locked door and dropped off all 3 relics, the encounter is finally over and you'll get your loot. Alright, one more encounter left. You'll make your way up a series of platforms and clear out some adds, before you finally jump over to this door which opens when everyone's next to it. This will take you up to the final encounter, Rhulk the First Disciple. To prepare, you'll want everyone on DPS supers like Nova Bomb, Tether with Mobius Quiver, and Thunder Crash. Well of Radiance is essentially useless here because the boss is mobile. Having one Titan on Bubble is pretty helpful for the damage buff, and for weapons, you definitely want meta DPS weapons here. Popular combinations at launch are Izanagi's Burden with Catalyst and an auto-loading rocket launcher, Sleeper Simulant, and DPS secondaries as well, like a Vorpal firing line sniper or a fusion rifle. For primary, things with Firefly and Dragonfly are pretty helpful in clearing out waves of Scions and minor enemies. Having one person with a divinity is pretty much essential, as this boss has a small crit spot and moves a lot and can regularly be facing away from you when you're damaging him. The goal of the fight is to just kill Rhulk. The fight has 3 phases, 2 buff collection phases and then DPS phase. Before you start, you want to designate 4 people to be on buff duty and 2 people to be on callouts for the first phase. Then for the second phase, you'll want 1 person on buff duty and everyone else will be on callouts. Now, let's go through the first phase, as this is the longest phase. This is where you'll have 4 people rotating 2 buffs, one called Leeching Force and one called Emanating Force. Both buffs have a timer of about 45 seconds, and either one will kill you if your timer runs out to 0. Essentially, what you will be doing in the first phase is having players obtain the Leeching Force buff, then converting that Leeching Force buff to Emanating Force, and then depositing the Emanating Force into specific pillars with symbols. You need to deposit 6 Emanating Force buffs into 6 respective pillars to move on to the next phase. So, how is this done? To start, have one person stand on the middle plate, which will spawn a darkness crystal right above Rhulk's head. This will give that one person Leeching Force. Through this phase, you always want to have one player keep Leeching Force. Now that this first player has Leeching Force, adds will spawn and Rhulk will start teleporting around, doing an attack where he shoots beams of light out. If at any time, if you have the Leeching Force buff and you get hit by this attack, it will convert it to Emanating Force. The first player should avoid having this happen for Rhulk's first attack. Then, once it's done, they should step on the middle plate again, and this will spawn 2 darkness crystals up in the sky. Designate 2 players to be responsible for the left side and 2 players to be responsible for the right side. When these 2 crystals spawn, 1 player on the left team will shoot the left one, and 1 player on the right team will shoot the right one. Once this happens, the 2 players shooting the crystals will now have Leeching Force, and the player who stood on the middle plate to activate those crystals will have the Leeching Force buff removed. This process is called splitting, and you want to get very familiar with it. This essentially allows you to take one Leeching Force buff and turn it into 2 people with it. Now that 2 people have the Leeching Force buff, you'll designate one of them to keep it and one of them to convert it to Emanating. To make it simple, we determine who does which by where Rhulk does his next attack. If he does his next light attack on the left side, then the person who was on the left team will convert their Leeching to Emanating, while the right person keeps theirs as Leeching. If Rhulk does his next light attack on the right side or in the middle, then the person on the right team will convert their Leeching to Emanating, and the left person will keep theirs as Leeching. While this is going on, 2 Glyph Keepers will spawn on the left and right, just like the last encounter. Only players with a buff can read the symbols on the Taken one, and only players without a buff can read the symbols on the Scorn one. The callout works the same as the last encounter. Find the symbol that is the same between each set of 3. This symbol becomes the location of the deposits for the rest of the phase. There are 6 small gray pillars in front of you that will have 3 symbols on them each. Note if you have a buff, you won't be able to see the symbols. We call these 3 pillars L1, L2, and L3, R1, R2, and R3. 2 of these pillars will contain the symbol that was the same between the Glyph Keepers, and either of these pillars is the location where you need the player who converted their Leeching Force to Emanating Force to deposit. You can get pretty advanced here and have 2 players dunk at a time, but to keep it simple, I recommend just doing 1 at a time until you've learned the encounter. Essentially, you'll just keep repeating this process for 6 Emanating Force deposits. 1 player splits Leeching into 2 players, 1 player keeps it, 1 player converts to Emanating and then goes and deposits. The player who kept the Leeching then splits again to 2 more people and repeat. Keep up with the adds and abominations, and eventually Rhulk will move into the top of the ramp and allow you to progress to Phase 2. One other note about Phase 1 is if you accidentally lose the Leeching Force buff, meaning 2 people converted or maybe the person with it died, you do get 1 chance to get it back. At this point, if you stand in the middle, Rhulk will shoot another darkness crystal above his head that you can shoot to grab the Leeching. However, if you lose the Leeching Force a second time from your entire group, shooting this crystal will go immune and you will have to wipe. So as I said, make sure you don't lose the Leeching Force buff. A second note is if you deposit an Emanating Force buff into the wrong pillar, you'll die and lose the buff. Also note that as the encounter progresses, the symbols on the pillars will reset and change. So every time a new person gets the Emanating Force buff, have someone call out the new locations to deposit it. One final note is that there is a very subtle orange bubble around Rhulk, preventing you from pushing forward. If you have the Emanating Force buff, you can run through this to deposit. However, if you don't have a buff, it will boop you back and knock you off the map, so you can't push up too far. Once Rhulk has invited you up the stairs, you'll enter Phase 2, which I call the pre-DPS phase. Here, you'll need to do 2 things. First, you'll again need to collect Leeching Force buffs, convert them to Emanating Force, and deposit them into the correct pillars, this time which are in the 4 corners. And second, you're going to need to break the weak points on Rhulk's body as they appear. In this phase, I usually designate a single person to do the buffs. You'll need to deposit 4 emanating buffs and then destroy 4 weak points to finally figure the DPS phase. While up here, Rhulk will do a dashing charge attack, so stay mobile and try not to turn your back on him so you know if he's coming your direction. If you get too close to him, he can karate kick you into oblivion. So basically just stay the heck away from him at all times. If he does his dash attack, he'll drop his glaive on the ground and it will spin. At this point, the person designated on the buff will shoot the glaive, and this will give them the Leeching Force buff. Also when this happens, one of 4 symbols will appear in its place, and the other players who didn't grab the buff can see it and call it out. This tells the person who shot the glaive where they need to deposit their Emanating Force buff. The Traveler symbol is the front left pillar, the Pyramid is back left, Darkness is the symbol in the back right, and the Light symbol is in the front right, as shown. The Leeching Force holder will need to jump into Rhulk's light attack, just like the last phase, to convert their Leeching Force buff to Emanating, and then go deposit to one of the 4 crystals that were called out. Sometimes the symbol is hard to see because of his light attack, but know that it will always show up in the location where their glaive was shot. Once the player who converted their leeching to emanating has deposited in the correct pillar, a weak point on Rhulk's body will start glowing. Use primary weapons here, and everyone should shoot this weak point until it breaks and stops glowing. Be very, 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 very careful here you do not shoot his glaive by accident, because sometimes it'll be right next to him. If you accidentally shoot the glaive, you will be giving the Leech and Force buff, instead of the other person who is doing that roll. Now, you can convert it yourself to emanating and then deposit if this happens, but it can mess things up if you don't know where to deposit, or you don't notice that you accidentally got it and then die because of the timer. Keep repeating this process until you've deposited 4 emanating buffs and broke his weak points 4 times. If you take too long to do this, he will take a knee and wipe you. However, if done within time, he will break into DPS phase. You'll get no tooltip on screen that this has happened, but he will do an animation where he rears his hands back and starts walking around in an attack position. At this point, unload everything you have, while staying mobile and keeping away from his dash attack, which he will keep doing. DPS super, heavy weapon, divinity, everything. You get about 20 seconds or so to damage him until he goes immune. At this point, you'll need to run back to the start area, collect ammo on the way, and get ready to repeat everything again. Killing him in one phase currently is very, very difficult, but a good team can 2-phase him pretty easily. You get a total of 3 DPS phases before he enrages and wipes you. Once you've gotten his health down to the final 10%, he'll do his final stand. He'll go immune for a brief second, and then you'll need to all-out DPS him, because he will start imminently stacking Pervading Darkness. Remember, when you get to 10 stacks, you die. And at this point, there is no way to cleanse yourself or stop it. So, you have to kill him before everyone gets to 10 stacks. Also note that if you get hit by his light power attack, it will cause your Pervading Darkness to stack even faster. So try to avoid this as he does it. It always comes out in a 4-way direction. If you do enough damage to him in this final phase, you'll watch him fall, and you will successfully finish this raid. Congratulations. The final chest, which is actually his glaive, acts as a vendor to purchase items you've already unlocked. And you can also purchase a guaranteed red bar weapon that you've unlocked per account per week, so don't forget to grab this. Most of the raid weapons require 5 deep sight versions to unlock the pattern. Best of luck in getting this raid done, Guardians. It feels good to be back creating guides for you all. Let me know how I did, and feel free to drop a like and hit the subscribe button to stay connected for future video releases. Stay safe out there, Guardians, and best of luck.